Donald Trump is making all sorts of concerning public statements about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the apparent upcoming negotiations between him, and he wants to have a summit in Saudi Arabia with Putin. And then Europeans are holding an emergency meeting, European leaders, and we have a leaked confidential agreement that the Trump administration sent to Ukraine demanding some wild stuff from Ukraine, I guess in return for U.S. support for them. We'll get into all of that in this segment. First, let's start with some of these public statements, some of which we've looked at before to get the context, and then we'll look at what happened at this emergency meeting among our European allies. Why am I describing it as emergency? Well, because they did, and it's about Trump, and it's about what are they going to do amid a lot of concern that Trump is getting ready to abandon the U.S.'s longstanding allies and hand over so much or potentially craft a dangerous agreement with Putin. If you appreciate the show, please do click the subscribe button, or if you want to go a step further, you can become a member by clicking that join button below and get the members only content. It's so fun. So here's Trump saying, yeah, I trust Putin, and I think that despite him being the reason for this entire lack of peace, I think he really wants peace.
I believe he wants peace. I believe that President Putin, when I spoke to him yesterday, I know him very well. Yeah, I think he wants peace. I think he would tell me if he didn't. I'd like to see peace.
Do you trust President Putin?
I believe that, I believe that he would like to see something happen. I trust him on this subject. I think he'd like to see something happen. I think it could have happened a long time ago. I think Biden, number one, it should...
That statement, why wouldn't, or why would Putin tell me he wants peace if he doesn't? Tells you everything you need to know about Trump. Why would a world leader, a brutal, murderous dictator lie? A lot of reasons. A lot of times, dishonesty is leveraged for someone's own interests when they don't believe that if they told you the truth, they would be able to yield the conclusion they're looking for. What's the conclusion that Putin's looking for? Massive concessions for Ukraine, forced by the U.S., without a deal that implements any security guarantees and gives any guarantee to Ukraine that in 3 seconds, Russia won't just start the invasion again after having a second to catch their breath. So get the concessions, but don't really give anything meaningful in exchange, setting up further bloodshed and destruction. That's what Putin hopes he can get out of Donald Trump. And Trump seems far too naive, or the wrong priorities or the wrong stance on this, I guess, to be the one in this room, especially as he's separating Ukraine from the talk. He's not allowing Ukraine in, which makes no sense when we're talking about the fate of their country. Then you have this.
Yesterday were pretty accurate. I don't see any way that a country in Russia's position could allow them, just in their position, could allow them to join NATO. I don't see that happening. And long before President Putin, Russia was very strong on the fact that I believe that's the reason the war started, because Biden went out and said that they could join NATO, and he shouldn't have said that. As soon as he said that, I said, you know what? You're going to have a war.
So we've addressed this a bunch of times just to reiterate, aside from sometimes the dishonesty about the specifics of that justification, even if we accept the premise that Putin invaded Ukraine because he didn't want Ukraine to become a part of NATO, that adds absolutely zero moral, legal, international justification for invading. Ukraine is a sovereign country. Thus, Ukraine can join defensive military alliances as they so choose. And so Trump just espousing the lie that Putin tells, which is, no, I was forced into this because I was scared, when he had no reason to be, but he just doesn't like that his empire is dwindling. And a lot of people are choosing to be friends, not with Russia, and are economically intertwining themselves, not with Russia. But that's not Ukraine's fault. That's not justification for these actions, obviously. Then this.
One of the first meetings I want to have is with President Xi of China, President Putin of Russia, and I want to say, let's cut our military budget in half. And we can do that. And I think we'll be able to do it.
Okay, so quite the lofty goal there. What's so weird, though, something's weird about this whole we have to do a summit because Putin and I were such buddies. I am going to be able to get a perfect deal, but that's going to take Ukraine handing over their entire country to the United States, essentially. Not really, but becoming in debt to us like you wouldn't imagine what we're going to get to. What's weird about this is that he promised the war already would have been over by now.
Could end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours.
Yes, I
How
do.
would you do that?
I know Zelensky very well. I'll end that war between those two countries in 24 hours. It won't even take that long. I will get the war ended. I'll stop all of those lives from being wasted and lost. And there'll be no more bombing of Ukraine. There'll be no more bombing of Russia. And everybody will be happy. It can be negotiated, I think, within 24 hours.
All right, so we're past 24 hours is, I guess, the takeaway there, which is strange because I really, 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 really thought that this strategy was going to work.
I would tell Putin, you got to settle. I would tell Zelensky, you got to settle. I would tell one, you're going to load up with money. I'd tell the other, you're not going to get any money. I would get a settlement in 24 hours.
Gotta settle. It's never less weird hearing that. But on to the important stuff. The Associated Press reports European leaders hold emergency talks fearing that Trump has abandoned age-old allies. But I know Putin so well, and I'll tell him, you gotta settle. Those are the two. We have a leader as a part of the most powerful country in the world who approaches world affairs like that, which is frightening our allies such that they have to hold this meeting. European leaders sought to form a united front Monday at emergency talks in Paris, called after a U.S. diplomatic blitz on Ukraine, which has thrown a once solid alliance into turmoil and left the Europeans questioning the reliability of their key transatlantic partner, which is a tragic thing to have to deliver to all of you. Shortly before the meeting, French President Emmanuel Macron spoke with U.S. President Donald Trump, but Macron's office would not disclose details about the 20-minute discussion. Leaders of Germany, the United Kingdom, Italy, Poland, Spain, the Netherlands, Denmark, and the European Union met at the Elysee Palace for talks on Europe's security quandary. NATO Security General Mark Rutte was also there. Since last week, top U.S. officials from the Trump administration on their first visit to Europe left the impression that Washington was ready to embrace the Kremlin while it cold-shouldered many of its age-old European allies. Think about that. I keep saying it. I'm America lover. I am. I really am. But one of the reasons that America has become the America that you know is because of our allies and the strength that has come of these alliances. And the fact that Trump is really willing to put those up in flames so quickly because Putin, told him he's handsome or something behind the scenes is really shameful. Also being reported on by the Associated Press on this agreement. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's directed his ministers not to sign off on a proposed agreement to give the United States access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals because the document was too focused on U.S. interests. Now, you might be thinking, well, Ukraine is desperate. Why in this moment would they not sign off on an agreement that Trump proposed to them? The reason is because the proposed agreement was crazy. The Telegraph broke this news, revealed Trump's confidential plan to put Ukraine in a stranglehold. Panic in Kyiv as U.S. president demands higher share of GDP. Listen to this. Higher share of GDP than Germany's First World War reparations. The victim needs to owe the United States more compared to their GDP than was demanded of Germany after they caused the deadliest conflict in human history. What are the specifics? Donald Trump's demand for a $50 billion payback which doesn't make sense given the numbers that I'll go over with you, from Ukraine goes far beyond U.S. control over the country's critical minerals. It covers everything from ports and infrastructure to oil and gas and the larger resource base of the country. The terms of the contract that landed at Volodymyr Zelensky's office a few weeks ago amount to the U.S. economic colonialization of Ukraine in legal perpetuity. It implies a burden of reparations that cannot possibly be achieved. The document has caused consternation and panic, understandably so, in Kyiv. The Telegraph has obtained a draft of the pre-decisional contract marked privileged and confidential, and it states that U.S. and Ukraine should form a joint investment fund to ensure that hostile parties to the conflict do not benefit from the reconstruction of Ukraine. And you can go through some of the specifics here, but the agreement covers the economic value associated with resources of Ukraine, including mineral resources, oil and gas resources, ports, other infrastructure, leaving it unclear what else might be encompassed. And the U.S. will take 50% of reoccurring revenues received by Ukraine from extraction of resources and 50% of the financial value of all new licenses issued to third parties for the future monetization of resources. There will be a line on such revenues in favor of the U.S. That clause means pay us first and then feed your children, said one source close to the negotiations. It states that for all future licenses, the U.S. will have a right of first refusal for the purchase of exportable minerals. Washington will have a sovereign immunity and acquire near total control over most of Ukraine's commodity and resource economy. The fund shall have the exclusive right to establish the method, selection, criteria, terms, and conditions of all future licenses and projects, and so forth. In this vein, it seems to have been written by private lawyers, not the U.S. Departments of State or Commerce. Oh, great. This is the art of the deal, man. Now, I'll note that Zelensky has proposed, as is noted here, the idea of giving the U.S. a direct stake in Ukraine's rare earth elements and critical minerals. But as this article notes, no one thought this is what was going to be slapped down on Zelensky's desk. He has rejected it, saying, as was documented in the Associated Press article, that this is not something that they can accept, not just because of the huge demands, but what they're getting in return, which is a vague, if you want our support, from what I can tell. There's not clear defined security guarantees such that they know, okay, we're handing over our country to the United States. We're going to be in debt forever, but it's okay because we're definitely going to be safe. It's not even that. It's give us everything and we'll see. And we'll circle back with you. Next part, a new Versailles. If this draft were accepted, Trump's demands would amount to a higher share of Ukrainian GDP than reparations imposed on Germany at the Versailles Treaty, later whittled down at the London Conference in 1921. And it goes through more there. But Donald Trump told Fox News that Ukraine had essentially agreed to this. Not so much. And he warned that Ukraine would be handed to Putin on a plate if it rejected the terms. Now, this is the characterization from this author. The quote is, they may make a deal, they may not make a deal, they may be Russian someday, or they may not be Russian someday, but I want the money back. That is saying, oh, yeah, you want an authoritarian regime to not take over your whole sovereign country and in the process slaughtering a bunch of soldiers and civilians? Well, we're very willing, our ally, we're very willing to let that all happen to you unless you give us an economic agreement that you couldn't possibly fulfill. Trump said the U.S. had spent $30 billion on the war so far because he just makes up numbers, adding that it would be stupid to hand over any more. It'd be stupid. Isn't it so weird how the U.S. president talks about global events of massive magnitudes? I just think it'd be stupid. It'd just be so stupid if we do that. In fact, the 5 packages agreed by Congress total $175 billion. That's the real numbers. But that's of which $70 billion was spent in the U.S. on weapons production, because we were giving old weapons. We were going to do this anyways. We replenish our weapons, so we give our old ones to Ukraine, and then we replenish our own. Some of it is in the form of humanitarian grants, but much of it is in the lend-lease money that must already be repaid. So it's a loan. The numbers are lied about from MAGA a lot, so be on the Look out for that, by the way. The second violation of Ukraine. Ukraine cannot possibly meet his $500 billion demand in any meaningful time frame, leaving aside the larger matter of whether it is honorable to treat a victim nation in this fashion after it has held the battle line for the liberal democracies at enormous sacrifice for 3 years. Exactly. Ugh. Who really has a debt to whom, may one ask? Yeah, if anyone's having to pay huge debts, it would have to be Russia. My style of deal making is quite simple and straightforward, says Trump in his book, Art of the Deal. I aim very high. Here, let me read this properly. I aim very high. Nah, I can't do it. And then I just keep pushing and pushing and pushing to get what I'm after. Oh gosh, I could write a book like that. How do I do a show? Well, how do I do the biggest show on all of the internet? Well, it's simple. I just talk and then I talk and then I talk. In genuine commerce, the other side can usually walk away. Trump's demand is iron fist coercion by a neo-imperial power against a weaker nation with its back to the wall, and all for a commodity bonanza that exists chiefly in Trump's head. This is referencing other parts of this article where it talks about his misunderstanding of some of the natural resource discussion. Then Trump said, oftentimes the best deal you make is a deal you don't make, said Trump, offering another one of his pearls. So how am I such a good deal maker? I push and I push and I push and I push, which has gotten me into trouble in other parts of my life, I might add. And then I also do the best deals by not making them. Zelensky does not have the luxury. He has to pick between the military violation of Ukraine by Putin and the economic violation of Ukraine by its own ally. I mean, that sums it up. And he said, no, we're not doing this, with the hopes that Trump's whole, we'll hand it over if you don't agree to everything that we want so that we can just suck you dry of every last resource and dollar that we think we can get. The hope is that Trump's not actually going to follow through on that. But this is why emergency meetings are being held, because the U.S. president is acting horribly. And then Kalen, a guy who's named Kalen and is a journalist. And if you want to throw this up, this is his profile. He posted an excellent video where he talks about how the U.S. in so many ways has really let down Ukraine.
In 1994, Ukraine signed a deal to give up its nukes, like the one behind me. This is an intercontinental ballistic missile, in exchange for its security and its sovereignty, and the West promised Ukraine that. And in 2014, when Putin took Crimea, Angela Merkel and the rest of the West took Putin for a champagne brunch and congratulated him. They opened the Nord Stream pipeline and they paved the way for Putin, believing he could do whatever he wants in Ukraine. And that is why this invasion happened in 2022, because of the West's betrayal. And now, last week, Trump sends his MAGA delegation right to the capital here in Kyiv to congratulate Putin on invading Ukraine, on the genocide and the pillage of this country. And I've come here to show the scale of the stockpiles that this country had, the third largest nuclear arsenal on the planet. And it's absolutely galling to see, and galling to see all of these weapons gather dust. And America has completely lost its integrity with this. No country is ever going to give up its nukes ever again and listen to the West's guarantees. And it's vital to remember too, if the West hadn't convinced Ukraine to give up its nuclear weapons, this country would not have been invaded by Russia. Russia would never have done it. When Ukraine wins this war, it won't be because of the West, it will be in spite of the West.
And it was gonna be because of the West. And I think that would be an oversimplification, what he said there, because there's still a lot from Western countries of support, and the U.S.'s support has been crucial, especially under Biden. But it is a true tragedy that because of a deal that we convinced Ukraine to make some time ago, giving up the nuclear weapons, with some understanding that wouldn't mean Russia would just then invade and take over, and we've really failed them. We really failed them on that. I have more to say, but I'm trying to keep this segment under 20 minutes, so I'm going to wrap it up there. Share your thoughts in the comments.